Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep on the book of Genesis.
Ooh, exciting.
It's one of those texts that just has this staying power, It's been around for millennia,
hmm
but it still speaks to something in us.
It really does.
And we're going to look at why that is.
Yeah.
And to help us do that, we're going to be using this really interesting YouTube video
Right.
called Is Your Lack of Everyday Courage Holding You Back? It's from a channel called The Bible Audio Experience.
Interesting.
Now, I know it sounds maybe a little out there, but trust me, it all connects.
Okay.
So let's get into it. So Genesis, the first book of the Bible,
Yeah.
it's way more than just a collection of stories, right?
Right. It's really the foundation for so much of Western thought, Western philosophy. It's a framework for understanding who we are, how we relate to, a creator, and how to navigate life, the complexities of life.
And the thing that always gets me is how these stories, they feel so ancient, and yet
I know.
they still have so much to say about the human condition.
Exactly. Like they're timeless.
Yeah.
And the video we're talking about today, it really highlights this. Like, for instance, the concept of the fall from grace that originates in Genesis.
Right.
It's echoed in literature
Yeah.
throughout history. I mean, from like Shakespeare's Macbeth all the way to like modern stories about characters who lose their moral compass,
Mhm.
It speaks to that idea that we all have that potential for good and evil inside us.
That's so true. I've never thought about it like that before, connecting it to Macbeth.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And what's also really cool is how the video connects the idea of creation from Genesis
Okay.
to our human desire for order and meaning.
Right. Okay, so the creation narrative, I mean, come on, it's iconic. Light from darkness. Why do you think those images are so enduring?
Well, I mean, think about it symbolically, right? It's about bringing order from chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And as humans, we crave that. We're naturally drawn to patterns and structure.
We like to make sense of things.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to make sense of the world around us. And so when you think about it, especially in a world that can often feel very chaotic,
Effin.
unpredictable,
Right.
the creation story, it gives us this comforting image of a powerful force that brings order, that makes sense of everything.
Yeah, it's almost like we try to do that in our own lives in a way.
Not really.
Like whether it's through routines or like setting goals or even just trying to understand our own experiences and make sense of them.
Absolutely. It's like we're all trying to create, our own little pockets of light in the darkness,
Yeah.
just like that creation story.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But Genesis doesn't just like shy away from the darkness either, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can't talk about creation without talking about the fall.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that's where I think this whole idea of courage, which the video really focuses on,
Okay.
comes into play. The fall is often seen as this story about temptation and disobedience,
Right.
consequences of our choices.
Yeah.
But it can also be seen as a story about courage.
Okay.
Like the courage to face our own flaws,
Mhm.
the courage to acknowledge our mistakes,
Right.
to actually try to seek redemption.
And there's something so hopeful about that. Even though it is called the fall, there's still this glimmer of, like, it's not the end.
Yeah, it doesn't end with like,
It's not just doom and gloom.
no, it's not doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And that's such an important point because I think Genesis doesn't try to sugarcoat the human experience, right? It acknowledges, our capacity for good and evil, for creation and destruction.
Right.
But it also suggests that even when we mess up, even when we make mistakes,
When we fall short.
when we fall short, there's always that possibility of redemption,
Mm-hmm.
of starting again.
Yeah,
And that's such a powerful message. And I think that's why it still resonates with people today.
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've talked about creation. We've talked about the fall. I think it's time to talk about probably one of the most famous figures in Genesis.
Yes.
Abraham. And his story is really, really central to this video and especially this theme of courage.
Absolutely. Abraham is all about taking these leaps of faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that requires a ton of courage. And the video highlights a few key moments in his life that I think are really relevant here.
Okay.
First, just think about the fact that he was willing to leave everything he knew, his home, his family,
His whole life.
his entire life,
Yeah.
just like that, based on a promise from God.
Right. And that's a big deal.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I can't even imagine making a decision like that, especially when you don't have all the answers.
I know. It's not easy.
No.
And that's what's so powerful about his story, right?
Yeah.
It suggests that sometimes, to really live out our purpose, we have to be willing to step outside of what's comfortable.
To embrace the unknown.
Yeah. And just trust that there's this bigger plan unfolding, even if we don't have all the pieces.
That's tough.
It is.
Yeah. And it's not like his journey was just like a walk in the park either, right?
Oh,
The video mentions that he had periods of doubt, uncertainty.
right. Because it's not just blind faith.
Right.
He questioned.
He's human.
He's human.
Yeah.
Yeah, he struggled. He even bargained with God sometimes. And I think that's a really important part of his story.
It is.
It reminds us that, faith isn't about having all the answers
Yep.
or never doubting.
It's about what you do with those doubts.
Yeah. It's about holding on to that trust even when things get rough,
Yeah.
even when it's hard.
I like that. I'm starting to see these parallels, like with Abraham's story and the courage that we need in our own lives.
Exactly. And we're just getting started.
Okay.
There's so much more to uncover about how this ancient wisdom of Genesis can actually help us, navigate all the challenges, all the uncertainties that we face in modern life.
I'm so ready for it.
Yeah.
Let's dive even deeper then into these challenges that Abraham faced and how we can maybe use those experiences in our own journey.
Okay. There's one challenge in particular that stands out, and that's the story of Abraham being asked to sacrifice his son Isaac.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Even just hearing you say that, it just brings up all these questions about faith and obedience and just how much we're willing to, I don't know, like give up for something that we believe in.
Exactly. It's such a powerful story, and it forces us to confront these really deep questions about, faith and sacrifice.
Mhm.
And it also gives us this framework for how we can maybe deal with those moments in our own lives when we have to make these difficult choices
Yeah.
or face these seemingly impossible situations.
Like, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, the video argues that even though, most of us aren't being asked to make these huge sacrifices like Abraham,
Right.
we all still face situations that require us to be courageous.
Like what?
Yeah.
What are some examples?
It could be something as simple as, speaking up for what you believe in,
Oh.
even when it's unpopular, or standing by a friend who's going through a hard time, even when it's inconvenient, or even just choosing to be kind
Yeah.
in a world that can feel very harsh sometimes.
It's funny because I never thought about those little everyday things as acts of courage.
But they are.
They are.
Yeah, and that's the point the video is trying to make.
Okay.
Courage isn't always about these big, grand gestures or heroic acts.
Right.
It's often found in these small, quiet moments
Mm.
where we choose to do what we believe is right,
Yeah.
even when it's really hard.
That's powerful. So we were talking about Abraham
Yeah.
and how, he was willing to follow where he felt he was being led,
Yeah.
even when it meant going into the unknown. I mean, that
And that's courage.
is courage.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not just about like physical journeys, right?
Right.
The video also talks about how his story can inspire us to take those inner journeys,
Inner journeys, yeah.
journeys of faith,
Mm-hmm.
trusting in something bigger than ourselves,
Absolutely.
even when we don't have all the answers.
Yeah. That's a big one for a lot of us, I think.
It is.
We struggle with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Doubt, uncertainty.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's where I think this whole story of Abraham and the sacrifice of Isaac,
Right.
it gets really relevant for those who might not know. This is where God asks Abraham to sacrifice his son
As a test of faith.
as a test of faith.
Yeah. And in the end, God stops Abraham and provides a ram to sacrifice instead.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Even just like thinking about it just raises so many questions
Mhm.
about faith and obedience and just what are we willing to sacrifice
Right.
for something that we believe in.
Exactly. And, it's a story that has been interpreted and debated for centuries.
For sure.
Yeah. But I think one of the key takeaways that the video highlights is this idea that true faith
Okay.
often requires surrender,
Hmm.
a willingness to kind of let go of our own desires
Okay.
and trust in this higher power, even when it's really hard to understand, even when it doesn't make logical sense to us.
Right. And so that kind of ties back into this idea of courage,
Yeah,
that it takes courage to surrender.
it does.
Yeah, to let go of the control,
Yes,
and trust that something good is going to come out of it.
exactly. And it's not about, blindly obeying. It's
Okay.
about cultivating a deep sense of trust
Okay.
and being willing to follow that inner guidance,
Yeah.
even when it leads us down a path that feels
Uncertain. Yeah.
uncertain, scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But isn't blindly following a promise, I mean, isn't that a bit dangerous? How do you balance that with reason, with using your head?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
And, I think it's important to acknowledge that faith doesn't always have to be about, following a specific religious doctrine.
Oh.
It can also be about trusting your own intuition,
Okay.
the inner compass that
Yeah.
you have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and your ability to make wise choices.
Even when you don't know what's going to happen next.
Even in the face of uncertainty. Yeah.
I like that because it makes it a little broader, you know?
Yeah.
It's not so...
It's not limited to just...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the video really emphasizes that courage and faith, they go hand in hand.
They do.
Yeah. It's about having that courage to trust in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
in your own abilities, to trust in the inherent goodness of the universe,
Wow.
even when you can't see the outcome.
This is kind of reminding me of something you said earlier about Genesis being this framework for understanding
Yeah.
who we are.
Who we are.
And I'm kind of starting to see that now.
Yeah,
How even though these stories are super old,
I know. They're ancient.
they still have so much to teach us about being human.
Yeah, it's about finding those timeless truths that connect us all,
Yeah.
right? The challenges might change.
Of course.
You know, the context might shift, but the core principles like faith, courage, resilience,
Yeah.
those remain relevant.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about creation, the fall,
Yeah.
Abraham's journey, and how this all connects to courage in our everyday lives.
Everyday courage, yeah.
Is there anything else we can kind of glean from Genesis?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yep.
I know this video is really emphasizing this power of belief,
Right.
but is there another way to look at it?
That's a great question. You're right. The video really does focus on faith and
Um,
trusting in God's plan.
Right.
But what's so interesting about Genesis is we can also view these stories through a more, I guess, humanist lens.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Yeah. Even if we set aside the religious aspects of it,
Right.
the stories still give us these profound insights into human behavior,
Okay.
our relationships with each other,
Yeah.
and our constant search for meaning and purpose.
Right, like that whole Cain and Abel story.
Exactly.
Like, it's not just about two brothers fighting, it's about...
Jealousy
Yeah,
and the consequences of anger, you know, when it's not controlled.
that's so true.
Yeah.
And what about the Tower of Babel?
Ooh, good one.
That's such a good story.
Even without the, you know, traditional religious interpretation, it's a cautionary tale about arrogance, you know,
Yeah.
and the importance of communication, collaboration.
It is.
Yeah.
Wow, so even if someone's not coming to Genesis from a place of faith,
Mm-hmm.
there's still so much to be gained.
Absolutely. The human drama,
Yeah.
the ethical dilemmas, the themes of love and loss,
Mhm.
betrayal, redemption.
That's all in there.
It's all there. And
Yeah.
those are all universal experiences that go beyond any particular belief system.
Yeah, it really is about what it means to be human.
Exactly. And I think that's why Genesis continues to have this power,
Yeah.
this influence, even after all these centuries, you know.
A classic for a reason.
It's a classic because it speaks to something deep within us.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered a lot.
We have.
We talked about this enduring power of Genesis
Mhm.
and how it's influenced everything from Western philosophy to our own personal lives.
Yeah.
We dove deep into creation, the fall, and of course, Abraham is this model of faith and courage.
So much to unpack.
Yeah, and we even explored how we can actually apply these ancient principles
Right.
to our modern lives, which is super cool.
Yeah. It's amazing how relevant it still is.
It really is. And how we can approach Genesis from both like a religious and a non-religious perspective,
Absolutely.
which I think is really cool.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, totally. But there's one more thing I kind of want to touch on before we wrap things up.
Okay.
This whole idea of Abraham's journey being like a model for living with purpose and meaning.
Yes.
That's something the video talks about, but what does that actually look like? You
That's
know?
the question, right?
Yeah,
And
practically speaking.
yeah. Like, how do we take this ancient wisdom
Right.
and turn it into something that we can actually use?
Yeah, like I love these big concepts, but
Right.
how do I actually make them work for me?
Yeah. How do we apply them?
Right.
And I think that's exactly what we're going to be unpacking in part 3.
Ooh, a cliffhanger.
A little cliffhanger.
Okay, I'm excited.
Yeah. We're going to explore some practical ways to actually apply these principles from Genesis to our own lives.
Okay.
And we'll discover how these ancient stories can really help us find that sense of purpose, that
Yeah.
meaning in the modern world.
Well, I can't wait for part 3.
Me too. It's going to be good.
All right, so we've spent the last couple parts of this deep dive really getting into Genesis,
Yeah.
uncovering all these hidden depths, all this wisdom that still applies to us today.
I know. It's amazing, right?
It is. It's kind of mind-blowing. But in this last part, we promised to get practical.
Yes, we did.
We've talked about faith, courage, resilience, purpose, all these big things.
Mm.
But how do we actually put them into practice?
Right. That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, where do we even start? How do we take these big concepts and turn them into like actionable steps, things we can actually do?
Well, the video uses Abraham's journey as a roadmap. He
Yes.
was willing to step into the unknown, to trust in this promise, even when he couldn't see how it would all work out.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we start too, by figuring out what our own promises are.
So like what truly matters to us?
Yeah, what are our values?
Mm.
What are our passions? What kind of impact do we want to have on the world?
Okay, so getting clear on that, that gives our lives meaning.
Exactly. That sense of purpose. It might be a personal goal or some creative project you're working on, or maybe even like a commitment to a cause,
Mm-hmm.
Or even just a way of being in the world that feels true to you, to your values.
Okay, so we've got that, but then what about doubt?
Oh, yeah.
Like we all experience it. We
Yeah.
do. How do we cultivate that, like that unshakable faith that Abraham seemed to have?
Well, remember, even Abraham had his doubts.
Right? He's human.
He's human. It's not about never feeling fear or questioning things. It's about trusting in something bigger,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's, a higher power or your own intuition, or even just that belief that you can handle whatever comes your way.
Okay, that makes sense. But some people just freeze up when they feel uncertain.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what do you do about that?
One thing you can do is focus on the things you can control.
Okay.
Your actions, your choices, your mindset.
Right.
Like Abraham, he took real steps to follow his path.
Mm-hmm.
So we can do the same, take small, consistent actions towards what we want, even if the big picture is blurry.
Okay, so like break it down.
Yeah. Make it manageable and don't forget to celebrate those small wins.
Okay, that's good advice.
Yeah, because the journey is just as important as the destination.
That's so true. I'm also remembering how Abraham was willing to surrender control.
Yes, that's a big one.
That's a tough one.
It is, especially these days.
Yeah, we like to be in charge.
We do. We want to control everything.
So what does it even mean to surrender?
Well, it doesn't mean being passive, just letting life happen to you.
Right.
It's more about recognizing that you don't have all the answers.
Okay.
And sometimes the best thing you can do is trust that things will work out, even if you don't know how.
It's hard.
It is.
Yeah.
But the more you practice it, the more you open yourself up to new possibilities.
Mhm. Okay, so it's like letting go of the reins a little
Yeah. You don't have to micromanage everything.
and trust.
Exactly.
I like that. And, this makes me think about resilience too.
Yes. Abraham, he had so many setbacks, but he never gave up.
He kept going.
He kept going. And I think that's a big part of living a life that's aligned with Genesis,
Yeah.
developing that inner strength to overcome obstacles.
So how do we do that? How do we become more resilient?
It's about seeing those challenges as opportunities to grow,
Okay.
trusting that you have what it takes to get through them, and remembering that even when things are tough, there's always hope.
That's so important to remember.
It is. And it's not always easy, but it's worth it.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts for our listener?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that the wisdom of Genesis isn't just some theory.
Right.
It's a practical guide to living a more courageous, more fulfilling life.
That's a great way to put it.
So by embracing those principles of faith, courage, resilience, and surrender,
Yeah.
we can navigate all the craziness of the world
Yeah,
with more intention, more clarity, more grace.
that's beautifully said. So listener, as you go out there and keep exploring Genesis,
Mm-hmm.
remember that the real power is not just in the stories, but in the truths that they reveal about us.
Yes.
So about what it means to be human.
It's a mirror.
It is, yeah. So what small act of courage can you take today, inspired by Abraham?
Mm.
What step can you take, even a tiny one, to move closer to your own promised land?
Ooh, I like that.
That life that is full of purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep asking those big questions, and keep diving deep.